at your thrift store, just to kind of bring that buy cost down.
So the stream just started, so but I'll definitely answer it for you in a bit. Let's let Brian hop in.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Monday Night Book Club call. Tonight, we're in Atomic Habits, chapter 10. I'm sorry, chapter 11, Walk Slowly But Never Backward. I think this is a good chapter. We're doing this book really slowly, like slower than I want to, but I just think this book has so much to give that we just want to take our time with it. But as always, if you have any questions that maybe you jotted down when you read it, or any connections, thoughts, ideas, any passages that spoke to you, feel free to jump on and share or ask questions. Also, you can throw them in the chat. And let's go ahead and get straight into it. Does anyone have any thoughts before we get started? This is a really short chapter. And I think what I was thinking was we'll just actually read it and then just talk about it because it's so short. And when I look at my annotations, there's like so much annotated, like it might be easier. But does anybody have any thoughts from last week or anything that struck them with this chapter? All right. And I like the title because, like, obviously we're looking through the primary lens is resellers, but of course all these things can apply to our lives in other ways. But walk slowly but never backward, to me, like when I read that, my first thought was listing, right? Because Chris was talking about the Pareto's law this morning, the 80-20 rule. And in the one thing, Gary Keller starts with the 80-20 rule, and then he narrows it down like even a couple more steps. Like when he wrote the book, The One Thing, he started with a list of 100 items from his company. Like give us some 100 ideas that we can where we can have an impact. And from that 100, he then gave them the challenge to take it to 20, which is the 80-20 rule. And from there, they chopped it down until they came up with one thing. And his one thing was to write the one thing, which obviously has had an impact on many people, me included. I don't know, that's a little bit off topic, I guess. But anyway, walk slowly but never backwards. On the first day of class, Jerry Usselman, a professor at the University of Florida, I know it's basketball season right now, March Madness, divided his film photography students into two groups. Everyone on the left side of the classroom, he explained, would be into the quantity group. They would be graded solely on the amount of work they produced. On the final day of class, he would tally the number of photos submitted by each student. 100 photos would rate an A, 90 photos a B, 80 photos a C, and so on. Meanwhile, everyone on the right side of the room would be in the quality group. They would be graded only on the excellence of their work. They would only need to produce one photo during the semester, but to get an A, it had to be a nearly perfect image. Now, I thought that's kind of interesting. Like if you were in that class, I wonder, like, which group would you want to go for? The quality group, 100 photographs gets you an A, or would you just prefer to get one amazing photo to get the A? At the end of the term, he was surprised to find that all the best photos were produced by the quantity group. And I highlighted that. At the end, all the best photos were produced by the quantity group. And like when I read that, it makes me think of like Tech, how he's been listing so much for so many years, and he's so fast, but yet his listings are perfect. He's doing the quantity game. Like he's told a story many times. Like he didn't start off, 250, 300 listings a day. He didn't start that way, but the quantity is where the best photos came from. And also, like, it also makes me think about sourcing. Like when we talk about home runs, you're more likely to find a home run if you're doing a quantity. If you're listing 5 a day, you're not going to be sourcing enough items to find very many home runs, I wouldn't think. But if you're listing 100 a day, just because of the sheer volume of items you're going through, you're more likely to find those home runs. During the semester, these students were busy taking photos, experimenting with composition and lighting, testing out various methods in the darkroom, and learning from their mistakes. I think that's key. learning from their mistakes. In the process of creating hundreds of photos, they honed their skills. Meanwhile, the quality group sat around speculating about perfection. I wonder if that was like our morning call a couple of years back, just talking about it, right? In the end, they had little to show for their efforts other than unverified theories in one mediocre photo. It is easy to get bogged down trying to find the optimal plan for change, the fastest way to lose weight, the best program to build muscle, the perfect idea for a side hustle. We are so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking action. As Voltaire once wrote, the best is the enemy of the good. I like that quote. The best is the enemy of the good. I refer to this as a difference between being in motion and taking action. The two ideas sound similar, but they're not the same. When you're in motion, you're planning and strategizing and learning. Those are all good things, but they don't produce a result. And like for myself, I've been guilty of that throughout the years. Like I love the planning part and the theorizing part and the researching part. But that's not where the results come from. Action, on the other hand, is the type of behavior that will deliver an outcome. If I outline 20 ideas for articles that I want to write, that's motion. If I actually sit down and write an article, that's action. If I search for a better diet plan and read a few books on the topic, that's motion. If I actually eat a healthy meal, that's action. Sometimes motion is useful, but it will never produce an outcome by itself. It doesn't matter how many times you go talk to the personal trainer, that motion will never get you in shape. Only the action of working out will get you the results you're looking to achieve. If motion doesn't lead to results, why do we do it? Sometimes we do it because we actually need to plan or learn more. And like when I read that, like Tech's been talking a lot about this, that, you know, the first part, like if you're new, you need the information, but there's a certain point where you have the information, you need to take the actions. Like in a way, it's like Tech was speaking right out of this section of the book. And it's funny how he does that without reading any of these books. Kind of weird. But more often than not, we do it because motion allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. And I think that's a really important psychological insight. I'm going to repeat that. We do it because motion allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. And so that might be an interesting concept. If you're someone like I know for me, I hate failure. I hate to lose. And so maybe that's why I prefer to plan and to think and to strategize. Because you kind of feel like when you're strategizing, you kind of feel like you're making momentum, but you're really not. Most of us are experts at avoiding criticism. It doesn't feel good to fail or to be judged publicly, so we tend to avoid situations where that might happen. And that's the biggest reason why you slip into motion rather than taking action. You want to delay failure. It's easy to be in motion and convince yourself that you're still making progress. You think, I've got conversations going with 4 potential clients right now. That is good. We're moving in the right direction. Or I brainstormed some ideas for that book I want to write. This is coming together. Motion makes you feel like you're getting things done, but really you're just preparing to get something done. When preparation becomes a form of procrastination, you need to change something. You don't want to merely be planning, you want to be practicing. If you want to master a habit, the key is to start with a repetition, not perfection. So the key is to start with a rep and not worry about perfection. You don't need to map out every feature of a new habit. You just need to practice it. This is the first takeaway of the 3rd law. You just need to get your reps in. Now, that's at the end of that first little section. I thought that was pretty good. Is anybody, anything kind of stand out or relate to anyone from that section?
Yeah, man, me and Tech were talking about this yesterday, where he said that one of the pitfalls that I can run into periodically is like I'm an excellent planner. I can plan my butt off and create like this elaborate math-based reasoning behind, you know, why you should go for X rather than Y. And I can like give you the paths where that X will take you and where Y will take you. And I do it all the time in my business. And sometimes when you're doing that, it like paralyzes you, because unfortunately what I'm learning about life is that it's not always super clear, where like this has a consequence and this has a consequence, and you don't know which one you want to indulge in, because you don't want to experience either of those consequences, right? So he was just like, dude, I'm built on massive action. Not me. He said him personally. He's built on massive action. Like if he says, okay, we're going to start doing whatnot, all of the rifles in the TechNSports army are aiming at whatnot, and they're making it happen, period. There isn't a, well, if I do whatnot and XYZ, and it's not that he doesn't, he probably has a part of him that like justifies it on a mental level and makes sure like, okay, this at least makes sense. But he just moves and makes it happen. While I'm still sitting here like, okay, yeah, I think this makes sense, but am I sure? Like this is, it puts me in a position where I can get so emotional about everything, and then I'd make no movements at all, you know?
Yeah, it makes me think of, what was it, E-Myth, where you have the three components. You have the technician, which does the work, the manager, which sounds like your manager is really strong, and I think mine is too.
Yeah.
As I kind of get, it's fun to plan and to theorize. And then the entrepreneur is the third part. And you need all three, but if those percentages are out of whack, then you're not going to get the results. And kind of going back to what we were reading, and based on what you said, you know, by taking that action, that massive action, like you're going to learn while you're acting. And I think for me, like I want to know every, like what you're saying is, I relate to that. Like sounds like you want to know every possible scenario and game plan for it. But the truth is, I think if we take the action, we can adjust, you know, because we're learning. Every mistake should be an opportunity to learn and to grow better. But if we get stuck in that planning mode too much, then we'll never get anywhere, I don't think.
Nothing frustrates me more than when I spend, you know, 20, 30, an hour, 2 hours planning something, trying to figure out which path to take. And then I sit down and I think, dude, I would have made more money if I would have just did my listings, like finished my shipping, did my listings, and then, you know, went to sleep or something. Like that would have been more profitable for me than spending these 3 hours trying to figure out what I should do. Like it's just, it happened to me today, which is why I said that. Like I was thinking for a massive portion of the day, and I was like, dude, if you just do your photography, your listings and shipping, like you're gonna make more money than if you spend all your time thinking about this. Way more money.
Yeah, sounds like you're like me, like the dreaming part of it. Like I've always been considered myself a dreamer. Like I like thinking and envisioning what could be, what should be, but like you're never going to get there if you don't take the action. And I've got better. I've got better. I'm still far from perfect. And I think I wonder how this can even relate to squirrel brain, like this fear of failure. Like I've been trying to grapple with that. Like, why do I have squirrel brain? Like when things are going pretty well, and then I'm like, oh, this idea, I just came up with this idea. Let me do this, and it works. And the thing is, it'll usually work. But like if we're constantly switching up game plans, it's like hard to build that momentum, that compounding, I think. Anybody else got any thoughts on that first section?
Yeah, I do. You know, I've been doing a lot of things different here in the last 6 weeks. And, you know, one of the things that I've changed, and it was very slow. I mean, I made this change very slow, and you'll understand why I did it very slow, because it's actually kind of physically painful. Going from a hot shower taker to a cold shower taker has been a very long process for me. and it's better for our physical body. And it's something that I wanted
the mitochondria, right? Like for longevity and
yes, absolutely. There's a lot of things. And then also, you know, the camera. I've started using the camera again, and it was just a slow process of, I mean, it wasn't that I wasn't wanting to do it or that I was procrastinating it. I just stopped using it and made a decision to stop using it because it was taking too much time for me to really figure out. And when I sat down and I thought, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And that just was like 2 days ago. And I figured that it was my lighting that was the problem. It wasn't the camera. This is a tried and true and a verified camera. It's the ELF.
right.
And it was difficult, you know, I mean, I'm already used to it now, you know, and it's because we take so many pictures and I'm used to it now. But when I first started using it, it was a very slow process of going, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to just kind of hold it just a little bit longer and then check it out, you know? So because when you were using our cameras on our phones, it's so much different. So, you know, going slower and not just speeding through, because that's one thing that I tend to do is I'll go too fast, you know? So slowing down is, you know, there's something to be said for that. It's a good thing, I think.
So, all right. So you were talking about like the showers on the camera. So like the comment, now just to summarize, like, are you saying it's okay to make change, to make change? Well, I mean, that's kind of the title, right? To make change slowly, as long as you get there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's a matter of just saying, okay, I gave up. And I hate to say that word. I hate saying I gave up, but I did. I gave up using this because I got frustrated. And I put it aside and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this again. I am going to muscle through this. And I made a strong, I mean, it's like I get mad at myself. I get like mad. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, you know? And that's what happens. You know, I get to a place where I can't take it anymore. And it reminds me of that saying, and I think I've said it in here before, when the pain of remaining the same is greater than the fear of change, we will then surely change, you know? So, I mean, this was a big one for me, you know, because it was just like, I'm going to trust the process. And it went very slow. Okay, I got all my batteries were set. They were, you know, I've got 3 extra batteries, you know, I was like, okay, I've got my SIM card, you know, so there wasn't a whole lot of thought, but just slowing down and learning how to use it and get used to this camera was yeah, that's really what it was. And the shower thing, that was a hard one. Yeah. Tough. And then I also got off coffee.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was another thing that was part of this experiment, you know, and I don't even say I'm not even gonna say it's an experiment anymore, because that's what it really was in the beginning. But now it's really just a changing tool. I don't need coffee anymore. I mean, it was a slow, painful process. I mean, kid, I had 3 migraine headaches that would not stop.
Yeah.
3 separate migraine headaches. I was walking around in circles. And then I was like, what in the heck? You know, in my 20s, I got off caffeine and it was just like, boom, done, easy peasy. Well, baby girl over here is 55 years old now. So it took me a minute, you know, and I started looking on the Mayo Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic talks about how our capillaries in our brain get constricted when we drink caffeine. Even though we drink a lot of water, we still get dehydrated. Even, you know, we get dehydrated. And when we stop drinking coffee, this is where the headache comes from. Our capillaries start opening up. And because the oxygen is going on in there, moving forward and stretching the vessels again, or the capillaries again, that's where the pain comes from. Mm. I had no idea. And I was like, okay, babies, open up. I'm patting my head, just come on, you can. But it was well worth it. And it was definitely a slow grind to get past it all.
Yeah, so. I like that, the self-improvement. And Now, coffee is, there's a lot of debate on that. Like
Well,
I do
there is some
bulletproof, and
benefits.
there's polyphenols, and there's longevity associated with coffee consumption. But yeah,
Absolutely.
there's the caffeine. Which is kind of,
Yeah, coffee does have some good benefits, and the Mayo Clinic did say that. But a measuring cup of coffee is something that I did not drink. I don't know about you guys, but I did not. My coffee cups, you
yeah.
know, this isn't my normal coffee cup, but it was maybe 2.5 cups, and then I would, honestly, I would probably drink 3 or 4 of them during the day, and that's too many.
And I'm glad you brought this up. I've noticed over the past, like my diet and everything has kind of been out of whack. I've gained some weight. I haven't been eating right. I've been sluggish and tired during the day, like really tired in the afternoon. And I was like, about a week or so ago, I'm like, all right, I could get back to it. And I went back to my bulletproof with intermittent fasting. And for me, like not eating bread and pasta and gluten, for me, I perform better. And sure enough, like my Fitbit, I track my sleep. Like I slept 9.5 hours Saturday and Sunday, which I never do. I normally sleep about 7, but I felt so great. Like today, I woke up and I did my intermittent fast. I had my bulletproof coffee with the MCT oil, and I felt great all day, and I'm more productive.
Mhm.
And I think that's the key thing is like if you look at Gary Keller, the one thing I think last week I shared that PDF, the 66-day habit tracker.
Mhm.
Like there's 7 areas, and like physical, spiritual, financial, emotional. Like I don't know all of them, but there's different ones, and all of those connect and make us who we are. So if you're out of balance, you're not going to be performing optimally. Like, and so for me, like I've been doing this, I've been adding habits um like the intermittent fasting, the walking. I started like my spiritual, and I know Christine, you have a strong spiritual sense. And so for me, I've noticed that that's been lacking. Like I haven't been reading my Bible. I haven't been going to church, and so I restarted that. And like each morning, like when I have my first cup of coffee right before the morning call, I read my scripture, and like I'm just feeling better all the way around, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And I think if we take care of all areas, whatever our beliefs or whatever,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
um, that's how we're optimized. And I like that you're looking at all those different elements.
Yeah. Yeah. And Yasana, yes, coffee does. I love the taste of coffee. I love the smell of coffee. But you know what? I love hot tea too. I do. I
Yeah,
love hot tea. I love all the different flavors. I have had not had a problem. Caffeine free, of course. But anyway,
yeah. I
that
do
is.
green tea in the afternoons, and here's one that I found has been working well for me too. Like that's one of my hobbies is like learning nutrition and whatnot. And cherry juice, like tart cherry juice, apparently is more effective for sleep than melatonin. So I've been drinking like 20 ounces of cherry juice, and that's what I told my wife. I'm like, it's funny, I did that, and now my sleep scores are so good.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
Tech says good showers, you don't need coffee. Cold showers, yeah.
Yeah.
And cold showers are really good. That's hard. I'm trying to get there too. Like I'll start off with it hot because I like hot showers, and then I'll try to finish it with cool to cold. But it's tough for me. And
Yeah.
Ashley says caffeine before workout can improve your workout. That's true. And also a workout before you start working. I was listening to a podcast about getting into a zone. Like that can help get you into a zone.
Mm-hmm.
Kombucha for life. That's good with all those probiotics. Melissa said, yeah, she's been drinking coffee for a long time, talking about headaches. Yep. Lot of benefits with coffee. All right. Okay, we're all over the map.
Yeah.
Kim says life is too short to take comfortable showers, hot showers only. Yeah. That's funny. All right. All right. Anybody else got anything before we move on to the next section? And by the way, I don't feel like I want to read to everybody. Does anybody, like when I used to teach, anybody want to read the next section? Well, Tom, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say that, just the first few pages of the chapter when it's talking about motion and action. I mean, it's like a lot of times I just do things. I just kind of hope it'll work out. That's probably not a good plan, but there's been times I've thought about doing something and then I keep thinking about it and thinking about it, and then I never did it. So that really hit home with me with the eBay. I I ain't gonna say I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. I just started doing it, and of course, joining this group, I found out I've been doing a lot of it wrong, but at least it was a step going in the right direction. You kind of have that gut feeling you're going in the right direction. So I don't know. It just kind of stood out to me. Just those first 2 pages that had my name all over it, man.
Good. Yeah, it's good that you can relate to that. There's another book, and I can't think of the author. It's on my to read list. And like her basic gist, I've heard her on podcast, is like she counts down. I think it's from 3, 2, 1 action. Because if we think too long about something, we can convince ourselves not to take action. But if you prime yourself, 3, 2, 1, go, it doesn't give you enough time to really convince yourself not to do something that you should do. All right, I guess let's move on to the next section. This subsection is how long does it actually take to form a new habit? If anybody wants to read and you have your copy, just let me know. I'll be glad to share the reading with y'all. Habit formation is the process by which a behavior becomes progressively more automatic through repetition. The more you repeat an activity, the more the structure of your brain changes to become efficient at that activity. Neuroscientists call this long-term potentiation, which refers to the strengthening of connections between neurons in the brain based on recent patterns of activity. I know, like my therapist, like he gave the metaphor of like you got a wheat field, and like if you have an old habit, it's always there. It's like these neurons, like you've chopped down this path, but if you replace that with another habit, like that wheat field will start to grow back up, and then the more you chop at your new path, the clearer it becomes. I don't know, maybe not the best metaphor, but those connections are real. With each repetition, cell-to-cell signaling improves and the neural connections tighten. First described by neuropsychologist Donald Hebb in 1949, this phenomenon is commonly known as Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. Repeating a habit leads to clear physical changes in the brain. In musicians, the cerebellum, critical for physical movements like plucking a guitar string or pulling a violin bow, is larger than it is in non-musicians. Mathematicians, meanwhile, have increased gray matter in the inferior parietal lobe, which plays a key role in computation and calculation. Its size is directly correlated with the amount of time spent in the field. The older and more experienced the mathematician, the greater the increase in gray matter. I think that's pretty wild that you can actually see how different parts of your brain can grow based on your habits and what you do. When scientists analyzed the brains of taxi drivers in London, they found that the hippocampus, a region of the brain involved in spatial memory, was significantly larger in their subjects than in non-taxi drivers. Even more fascinating, the hippocampus decreased in size when a driver retired. Like the muscles of the body responding to regular weight training, particular regions of the brain adapt as they are used and atrophy as they are abandoned. Of course, the importance of repetition in establishing habits was recognized long before neuroscientists began poking around. In 1860, the English philosopher George A. Lewes noted, in learning to speak a new language, to play on a musical instrument, or to perform unaccustomed movements, great difficulty is felt, because the channels through which each sensation has to pass have not become established. But no sooner has frequent repetition cut a pathway than this difficulty vanishes. The actions become so automatic that they can be performed while the mind is otherwise engaged. Both common sense and scientific evidence agree repetition is a form of change. And like to me, like I used to coach, and it makes me think like when when you're first teaching someone that hasn't played basketball, like how to shoot a layup, like, you know, like which leg to jump off of, you know, how to extend the arm, everything. Like that is such a foreign movement, especially with our offhand. If you're right-handed, shooting a layup with your left hand is very difficult. It takes lots of repetitions before it becomes somewhat normal. And I think the same thing, and it makes me think what we've talked a lot about in the group, you know, whether to be an everything seller or to niche down. If you're constantly listing new items, it's like you're having to do a new muscle memory every time, because you're having to look things up. Whereas if you do, like Isaiah does shoes all the time, like that pathway is pretty clear. Like he probably knows a lot of the information about shoes he doesn't have to look up. And when he does need to look things up, it doesn't probably take very long. Each time you repeat an action, you are activating a particular neural circuit associated with that habit. This means that simply putting in your reps is one of the most critical steps you can take to encoding a new habit. It is why the students who took tons of photos improved their skills, while those who merely theorized about perfect photos did not. One group engaged in active practice, the other in passive learning. One in action, the other in motion. That also makes me think back to teaching. Like, you know, like when I was a student, there was a lot more just like teacher-centered learning, teachers lecturing, and, you know, we're taking notes and not really involved. But like when I left teaching, like there was a period where I was an AVID coordinator, and we used all these student-centered ways of learning, like Socratic seminars where students would read and ask questions of each other and learn from each other. Interactive note-taking, just different ways of learning, where what you want is the student to be actively engaged in the learning, because research has shown they're going to retain more versus them just listening. And I think it's the same. It's the same with us. Like if you really want to learn something, you have to do it. And like when I was a teacher and a coach, like I felt like I learned more because I was having to teach others. And kind of curious, like people that lead some of these different calls, in a way, you know, you're kind of like a teacher. I wonder if your expertise in whatever call or whatever thing you're leading, do you feel like it's grown? I digress a bit. All habits follow a similar trajectory from effortful practice to automatic behavior, a process known as automaticity. Ooh, that's hard to pronounce. Automaticity is the ability to perform a behavior without thinking about each step, which occurs when the non-conscious mind takes over. It looks something like this. And I think the perfect example is like you're driving to work, right? Like if you have a 9 to 5, you don't really think about it. And they have a little what do you call it, a chart in the book, and you have, I guess, an X and a Y axis. One, you have repetitions horizontally, and vertically you have the automaticity, I can't pronounce that. And then you have your habit line, and it says in the beginning of point A, a habit requires a good deal of effort and concentration to perform. After a few repetitions, point B, it gets easier, but still requires some conscious attention. With enough practice, point C, the habit becomes more automatic than conscious. Beyond this threshold, the habit line, the behavior can be done more or less without thinking. A new habit has been formed. And so I think just my takeaway is like we got to be aware, like when we're creating a new habit or learning a niche or whatever, that's going to take a lot of effort at the beginning, but there will be a point where it becomes much easier. On the following page, you'll see what it looks like when researchers track the level of automaticity for an actual habit, like walking for 10 minutes each day. The shape of these charts, which scientists call learning curves, reveals an important truth about behavior change. Habits form based on frequency, not time. Habits form based on frequency, not time. So it's the reps, it's not the time spent. And then they have another chart of walking 10 minutes per day. And they start at 0 days up to 100 days. The graph shows someone who built the habit of walking for 10 minutes after breakfast each day. Stacking. Notice that as the repetitions increase, so does automaticity until the behavior is as easy and automatic as it can be. So, and it looks, and once again, kind of going back to Gary Keller, where he says most habits are formed in about 66 days. If you look at that chart, that's kind of where it looks like on this chart. It also is kind of hitting that habit line, like it's real steep, up to 20 to 30, and then that curve becomes less, and then once around 60 or so, there's not much further increase. One of the most common questions I hear is, how long does it take to build a new habit? But what people really should be asking is, how many does it take to form a new habit? That is, how many repetitions are required to make a habit automatic? There is nothing magical about time passing with regard to habit formation. It doesn't matter if it's been 21 days or 30 days or 300 days. What matters is the rate at which you perform the behavior. You could do something twice in 30 days or 200 times. It's the frequency that makes the difference. Your current habits have been internalized over the course of hundreds, if not thousands of repetitions. New habits require the same level of frequency. You need to string together enough successful attempts until the behavior is firmly embedded in your mind and you cross the habit line. In practice, it doesn't really matter how long it takes for a habit to become automatic. What matters is that you take the actions you need to make progress. Whether an action is fully automatic is of less importance. To build a habit, you need to practice it. And the most effective way to make practice happen is to adhere to the third law of behavior change. Make it easy. The chapters that follow will show you how to do exactly that. And it's got the chapter summary. The third law of behavior change is to make it easy. The most effective form of learning is practice, not planning. Focus on taking actions, not being in motion. Habit formation is the process by which a behavior becomes progressively more automatic through repetition. The amount of time you have been performing a habit is not as important as the number of times you have performed it. Okay. So anybody got any thoughts on that last section about how long it takes or how many reps it takes to before a habit becomes formed? And I think like the next chapter, the law of least effort, like I think relating this to reselling, like a lot of comments I hear in the calls and in the Facebook group is about the rate of growth. And I think that kind of plays into here, right? Like the more listings you get up, that's the habit will be formed more solidly. But if we're talking about the third law of behavior changes to make it easy, if we redline our Saturn, as Chris would say, you know, and you blow your engine, you're probably going to get set back, or maybe you stop listening, or maybe even give up on reselling. I don't know. I think that's why I prefer the slow grow method of just slow and gradual, where it doesn't feel like the effort is anymore. You're finishing in the same time or less because these habits are getting faster. And like Isaiah was talking about timing himself, and I've done that several times over the past week, and that is a huge hack. I don't know if it's just the clock running, but I'm more focused, and I notice each time I do it, I'm getting a little faster. So I think, I don't know, I think the slow grow is the way to go, and you could either get done earlier, or then you could slowly add more listings. What do you guys think about this chapter? Maybe how it relates to reselling or to anything else?
Tech asked, what was the last line of the chapter again?
Let's see, the last, here, I'll read the last paragraph. To build a habit, you need to practice it. And the most effective way to make practice is to adhere to the third law of behavior change. Make it easy. the chapter that follows will show you how to do that. And there's, I don't know if he meant the chapter summary, but the last bullet point on the chapter summary, the amount of time you have been performing a habit is not as important as the number of times you have performed it. So reps versus time, even though I think they're kind of related in a way, but.
So he's saying Tech isn't the best eBay lister because he's listed for 13 years. He's the best eBay lister because he's done hundreds of thousands of listings, which is a difference there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could have been doing this for 13 years, but not have done hundreds of thousands of listings. And as a result, you would never reach the level of mastery. Like LeBron isn't the best basketball player right now because he's played basketball since he was a kid. It's because he shot a basketball millions of times from then to now. It's the amount of reps, not the time spent.
Yeah, because you could be practicing for long hours, but if you're just half-assing it, and I've seen players do this, you're not getting quality reps in. Versus in that same, if you have an hour and a half practice and you're really focused and on it, like you can get a lot of quality reps in. Yeah, right. Tech says that's why we talk about perfect first, speed second. People skip the perfect part. Yeah, for sure. I know I sure did, man. When I was using this Hammock and Cellhound and even my own VA, I'm still paying for those sins. Golly. I was just trying to get the reps up the easy way without me learning how to do it properly. And the funny thing is, like, I remember back then, I'm like, there's no way I could ever list as fast. Like, it's funny, like, even when I had my own VA, I would take photographs, like 50 sets of photographs. They would create 50 mediocre listings. I didn't know that at the time. And some of them would sell. I think it was just the number of listings going up. But now, like, I know I could do 50 listings in a day in probably about the same time or not much longer, and they'd be quality listings. And, you know, Tech's always using baseball metaphors. It's the same thing, right? Like if you're doing batting practice or fielding work, like it's those repetitions. And it's the same thing. Everything has to be perfect. Your hand placement, you know, your stance, where your elbows are, your hips, all of that has to be perfected before you worry about the speed. And the same thing with the fielding. You gotta get the footwork down, the catching, the throwing, all of those. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I read the book a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but has it talked at all about deliberate practice in the book?
I don't think we've got to that yet.
Yeah, because I read the book about deliberate practice by the researcher Anderson, I think is his name, and it talks how if you're doing a lot of reps, but you're just doing it the same way every time, you're not going to get any better. Like you'll get in the habit of doing it. Like you'll have the habit down. You'll be really good at that habit of doing the reps. But what we're trying to do is getting into doing the reps and doing them so they can be as perfect as possible. And with eBay, it's even more important to be perfect than it is to get a lot of reps in. So you want to start with the perfect reps and then you slowly increase them as you go. But deliberate practice is where you are not just trying to do something, you're trying to do it and make it better. So it's all about trying to make it better. And one of the ingredients in making it better is like, one is you want to have that self-awareness of like, I know the standard I'm trying to reach, and I'm trying to make it better, but you can get even faster if you have that coach or that mentor that knows the best way to do it, and they can help guide you through those steps to make it even better. So that can make you get even faster. And I think that's why many of us have joined this group, is because there are people who are good at this and we're trying to learn from them. But I think that's a really important point. It's not just to focus on the reps, but also you have to think about, okay, I did these reps. What went well? What didn't go well? How can I improve what went well? And you can't just think about it. You have to actually apply those things. That's why if you're just watching all the videos that Chris is putting out or that Tech is putting out, but you're not actually putting into practice and trying to see how you can do it, you're not going to get any better. And so like, if just like they were talking about the pottery students, if all the pottery students that were just focusing on quantity, if all they did was try to make the same basic pot or like over and over again, like they wouldn't get any better. But they weren't just doing that. They were just like experimenting. They were trying different things. They were working on things to try to like make things better and improve, but not to like, but definitely the focus was still on quantity. And I think that's important as well. So you have to kind of combine those two things of doing the thing and trying to do it as much as possible, but also focusing on how can I make it better? How can I get better at it? That's why there are people who are 10 years into a profession and they're the same as someone who's 3 years into it, because they haven't gotten any better at doing those reps. They've just stayed the same. So it helps me to also think about that aspect of it when I'm like working on improving in all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, those are good points.
So in your opinions, how do you discern the difference between trying to figure out how to do something better and then implementing that, and doing something differently? You know, because like the reason why you hopped into shoes, Brian, was like you felt that shoes would be better for your business than clothing would be. XYZ are the factors why, so you made the change, right? The reason why I tried to sell books a long time ago is because I thought that, you know, books could be a better addition to my business, so I made the change. So how do you differentiate between I'm going to change my business and do something different, and then doing something better in my business? How do you figure that
Yeah,
out?
well, like for me specifically on the books and shoes, like I enjoy listing shoes, and I like the high ASP, the higher ASP. Um, but I guess the sticker was for me. The cost of goods on shoes is substantially more than clothing, because clothing is so there's such an abundance of it. And the kicker about clothing, like, yeah, I'll run into a lot of bread and butter, but like I'll also get home runs on clothing. Like I almost had this mindset, there's not home runs on clothing, but there is. And I don't have to, it's like all the things that like, and I was thinking about this. I'm like the two biggest sellers, they're not shoe sellers. And not that you can't make a lot of money on shoes. Tech chose clothing. Chris chose clothing. Like, why am I like,
Nah, Chris chose shoes like 5 times and then gave up on shoes.
this is true. This is true. That's a good point. And I don't know. I don't know the guy's name in the shoe call, but the guy with the Hoka 1-1s. Like, now, if I had that opportunity, and I could get nothing but Hoka 1-1s for $10 or less in great condition, well, then yeah, I'm gonna center my business around shoes, because you have an unfair opportunity. You're getting top of the line stuff, but I haven't found that. But I do have a tremendous amount of clothing around me that I can get very cheaply. And I list it faster. I guess that's the other thing. I list it faster. It takes up less space. And so I just decided to put what I prefer to do aside. And not only that, I was doing pretty well with clothing before I shifted. And then I was thinking, like, Tech was asking me, like, why am I switching? Like, if he's asking me that, like, I don't know. But your question was like, how do we know the difference between what we should do? What was the question again?
No. How do we know that? See, because all of us want to make our businesses better. I think everything that all of us attempt to do usually is our way of trying to improve our business in some way. No one's trying to intentionally, hurt their businesses in most cases, right? So how do we know the difference between, okay, this is me, improving my business, This is me making changes and experimenting to make my business better, and avoiding those pitfalls that you and I have both fallen into, where we just try to do something different.
Well, I think, like, if you think about it, like, I think about like an inverted pyramid. Like, we start out as everything sellers, right? Where we sell some of everything. So we should be able to analyze, the pros and cons of listing different items. I don't think, well, the thing is, I never really sold clothing. I did do shoes. I liked shoes. I never really did clothing until I joined this group. But like, when I did clothing, and then I kind of forgot exactly what it was entailed with shoes. And so while I was listing shoes over the past couple of months, I was really paying attention to the amount of time cleaning. Photography, the photography was no problem. Photography is actually easier because you can do it sitting down. Like, that's a plus for that. The cleaning takes more time than it takes for clothing. The listing, I don't know, they're probably similar as far as listing speed. I would say, like, when it comes to shipping, like, I can ship clothing way faster because, I have a little cart here with poly bags, flat rate envelopes, and padded envelopes, and that's 99% of what I'm shipping. But with shoes, even if I'm shipping shoes in a poly bag, like, I was still wrapping them in bubble wrap, or if I was doing a shoe box, that took longer. I don't know. It's just like I was analyzing it all, and I feel like I can do more clothes per hour or per day than I can do shoes. And then you couple that with the cost of goods. I don't know, you have to analyze it. I think I'm struggling with this, but I don't think you can know unless you actually do both. So, like, if there's another niche, like, if you haven't sold it, like, had you sold books before you went into shoes, Hassan?
No, that was my first foray and last.
So you wouldn't really know, right? So the only way to know. But here's the thing, though. Here's the other thing you have to think about is there's a learning curve in a new niche. So then you can even second guess yourself. Well, what if I didn't spend enough time in that niche and it just seems really hard, where in truth it would get easier over time? I mean, that's another factor, but I don't know. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think Chris is a great example of with the shoe versus clothing thing, because like, he could do really well in shoes, and just like, I mean, there's plenty of people who do well in both. But for him, he doesn't like the sourcing, and sourcing is hard, and he has to drive everywhere. And where he's located, it's a bad fit. Like, like San Francisco, Oakland traffic is just horrible. So unless that's you enjoy doing that and you're willing to spend the time like that, then the shoe game, even in that area, you could still do it. But with his setup and what he prefers to do, which is more of the processes, more of the listing and the photography, along with some, experiments and a little bit of this along the way, which you can still do, but it can't be your main business. That's, again, it's like what you had said, I think, on another call. Like, you could do that on the weekends. It's a fun hobby, but you got to do the main thing, which is, grow your clothing business or whatever, your shoe business. And I think, like, that's the thing, is like, it's like, I think of it as like Michael Jordan going from basketball to baseball. Like, yes, he has some physical skills and some skills from his childhood or whatever in baseball. So he could go there and do not like terrible, but obviously he's not going to be as good at baseball because he spent all this time in basketball. And that was made clear when he did try it. But like, he had already had all the success in basketball. He could just go over there. Whereas there's a lot of athletes that in high school, you start getting to the high school years and you're still doing a couple sports, but around that time, you have to kind of decide if you want to really pursue something. Like, that's around the time where you need to start choosing one or the other, because that's when you want to focus your attention on one or the other. Because if you're constantly dividing your time between two things, you're never going to become an expert in one of them, or you will, but it'll take much longer than if someone is only focusing on clothing and they're putting all their time in clothing. They're going to become an expert, really good at it, way faster than someone who's just doing both. And that's kind of the thing. You can start adding other categories after you're really good at something. And often doing other categories or experimenting with other ideas, if you can, there's a lot of people who take the connections and the synthesis, and they bring new ideas from other places into their business. So that's one way, like you could still focus on one thing while still reading, experimenting on the side, but you don't want it to affect that main business that you have. And you want to try to use the lessons you find in other places to improve your business. So for me, the difference is like, when you're trying to improve, are you trying to improve your main business, or are you trying to try something else and try to improve in that? And there's some overlap, like between doing listing and shoes, just like there's overlap between doing two different sports. Like I do Ninja Warrior, and if you're a really good rock climber, you can come over to Ninja Warrior and do really, really well. But there are certain things in Ninja Warrior that you won't be as good at. Like there's a lot of parkour elements that they won't be as good at. Just like there's a lot of parkour guys that come in and they're not as good as doing the rock climbing kind of hanging by their hands kind of thing. So like that's the difference, is like you can kind of improve in one thing, but there's always an opportunity cost with doing something else. And you got to kind of figure out like what's worth the opportunity cost for me. And if you're in the beginning, it makes more sense to just get good at that one thing, because you can make more money by getting good at one thing versus playing around in two different things for a while.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. Actually, that makes a lot of sense. When you think back to Jordan, he won 3 championships. His father was murdered. A lot of stuff was going on. He wasn't happy with Jerry Krause. He moved over to baseball, and he did pretty well at baseball. I mean, most people couldn't just make that switch in their 30s. Went back, won 3 more championships. But what was the cost? If he would have just stuck with basketball, he probably would have won 8 championships in a row. LeBron ain't doing that. No one's doing that. And I wonder, like, I mean, you get into the psychology of it. Like, if maybe after you win 3 in a row, it's just like, well, I know he was always looking for a challenge, if that was like the ultimate challenge. But what was that opportunity cost? And then relating that to reselling, even if you're rocking and rolling, you're killing it in your category, your niche. Like if you switch to another niche, and even like what Ashley's saying, if you do pretty well, but yeah, what if you would have invested that time and energy into growing your main niche, that you would probably exponentially grow versus going into another niche. I really like that. That's a really good metaphor, Ashley. And I think, I love how sports is like perfect metaphors to understand and compare business or other parts of life. Let's see, we're talking a lot of kombucha in the chat. All right. Okay, that was really good. Anyone else have any thoughts? And I think, like, kind of going back to that from another element, is like you can gain confidence, like once you become adept or you know, even good in a niche, and maybe that confidence, because like in eBay, and like what Ashley was saying, like there's similarities, and so you know, like I knew when I moved over to shoes, I felt like I would be successful at shoes, and I think I was for the short period of time I was there. But who knows what my listings would be if I would have just stayed in clothing and kept slowly raising that up. I'd probably be a lot further along than I am now. And the same thing, like with Jordan, he would have won. I mean, theoretically, you still have to do it, but probably would have run a couple more championships. All right, anybody got any final thoughts for tonight? I know I feel like we're just going so slow, but like there's just so much in these. Next week we'll be doing chapter 12, the law of least effort, and looking at my annotations from the last time I ran over this will be a good one too. So All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate all the conversations, everyone who shared, whether in person and chat. It always makes these much better. I always appreciate it. So thank you, and we'll catch y'all on the next call. Everybody have a good night.
Brian, can I mention one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to mention a fun experiment this guy in the internet did. This is kind of a general thing, not just about this chapter, but he had someone, because he's another work from home guy who does computer work. And, you know, if you're working on the computer, it's much easier to be distracted by going to fun websites and whatever. And so he hired someone as an experiment. He hired someone for a day off Craigslist for $8 an hour to sit next to him while he was at his computer, and to basically, whenever he got distracted and did something else other than his work, they would slap him. They had full permission to slap him. So he did that. He said it was like his most productive day ever, because like, you do not want to get slapped, you know? And it was like, I always remember that example, because it's like, if you really want to make sure you get work done, have someone right beside you, giving you, like, who has full permission to make sure you get back to work, just like an annoying micromanager kind of person at a corporate office.
Talk about adjusting your environment. Like we talked about that previously. That's the ultimate hack. Like, it probably only takes one slap and you're like, oh, all right. We'll leave Facebook alone.
Yep.
That's great. And it makes me think of a Stephen King short story I read years ago, where the guy wanted to lose weight, and like, he signed a contract, but basically it guaranteed him, and if he didn't hit his targets, it's been years since I've read this, but like, you know, they'd come chop off his finger or kill his cat, like it would escalate up. And I think if that negative consequence is strong enough, then, you know, the military is based on that form of, at least partially, that form of reinforcement.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. If you want to lose weight, if you have someone who is observing everything you do all day long, making sure you only eat a certain amount and you exercise a certain amount, you're going to lose weight. It's just not a sustainable model.
Right, the ultimate accountability partner. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was another good tidbit. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. And